Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. We have been so football heavy, and basketball season is sneaking up on us, but it's also basketball recruiting season. And nowadays, as Brad Underwood told me at Big Ten Media Days, he can bring guys to the football stadium with a great crowd, an enthusiastic crowd. So we thought this was a great time to reset for Illinois basketball recruiting and talk about who's next, because 2023 feels like it's pretty sewed up with two big commitments in that class, Amani Hansberry and Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. So let's bring in Derek Piper and talk about what's next, Derek, because Illinois basketball is feeling it on the recruiting trail. A third straight year being ranked in the preseason AP top 25, picked to finish second in the Big Ten. And Tim Anderson, Chester Frazier, Jeff Alexander doing what they're doing, which has been pretty good here.
It has been pretty good. Quick side note, what's next for me is trying to catch Isaac Trotter in the Illinois football predictions game by game, because I picked Minnesota, unfortunately, this weekend, not knowing Tommy DeVito's status. And you guys got that one right. I got one wrong, and now I'm playing catch up on Trotter.
If I would have picked Wisconsin like I was feeling it, if I would have stuck with my gut instead of my head at the time, Derek, I would have been there with Trotter. But you and me nodded up. Usually this doesn't happen. You're better at the prediction business than me.
That's been the past. We'll see. We got to take it year by year. New year. It'll be a very fun race the rest of the way. Probably a lot of Illinois predictions here going on, and hopefully they keep the momentum going forward. But yeah, basketball just around the corner, and recruiting wise, it was a great weekend to have a lot of talented guys on campus. Morez Johnson taking his official visit this past weekend, and then some other MeanStreets products. His teammate on that 16U squad, Carlos Harris from Curie, and then 2025 Melvin Bell at St. Rita with Morez and Trey McKenney, who's one of the top prospects in the Midwest out of Michigan, visiting as well. And Cole Serta, too, a shooter from Bloomington Central Catholic. So Illinois had a nice group to take to the football game, to have watch a practice over at Ubben. And they're going to try to continue to roll this ball along because, man, they're doing some big things recruiting-wise.
And I don't want to bury the lead any further, but Derek, we went and saw a tour of Ubben basketball complex. We got to, Josh Whitman does a great job of leading us through the tour, telling us about everything. And Brad Underwood and Shauna Green were there giving us some insight as well. What did you think about what you saw at Ubben?
I think I wanted to get in the hot tub is what I think. I mean, you see the hot tub, the cold tub, the underwater treadmill, and then just the whole, I mean, it was mind blowing to see the difference. We've been obviously in that building a lot, but to see its expansion, to see how nice the facilities are, some of the added features when you have that, how big the weight room is compared to that small area that Fletch had to do some magic in the past, but now he's got a lot more resources there to work with, and added court space on both sides. It's just, it looks like, and admittedly, I haven't toured a lot of other basketball complexes around the country, but just based on looking at some stuff in comparison and just getting the vibe of being in that, it seems like a top-notch facility, and more office space for the coaches. Brad Underwood's office with a 98-inch screen TV was pretty sweet. He says he's going to stock it with beer in case we ever get the invite to stop by. I was going to say decide to stop by. We probably need to get invited first, but
he's probably got a wine cellar somewhere in there. That's what he would do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Knowing how much he likes wine, and that's usually what he celebrates with when they get a recruiting win. So really, really cool to be in there. And it's a top-notch facility now to add to what they've got going winning-wise, development-wise, and Fletch is a big part of that too.
Yeah, if people had never been in the old Ubben, like, it was nice when they made it in 99 and the 2000s, I think it was really good. But, you started to lose some ground here in the facilities race, especially in the 2010s as everyone went nuts. I know Michigan's is state-of-the-art. Michigan State, you and I were kind of in that, Derek. Very light space, but a really impressive facility they have on top of Breslin there. So, yeah, I think Illinois kind of lost ground. But this, I asked Brad Underwood, like, who competes with you now in the Big Ten? He mentioned Michigan State. That's about it. He said Tennessee might be the best he's seen in the country, which, we don't think of Tennessee basketball all the time, but Rick Barnes obviously is doing a really good job, and they just got a lot of money. But there's just so much more space for activities, right? Like, they have so much more floor space in the actual practice gym. They don't have like gear all around, so people aren't running into stuff. The locker room is spacious and incredibly nice. The weight room, as you said, what is it, 6 times the size of the thing they used to have now? Like, they can fit the whole team actually in the weight room. And they just have so much more storage space, which I think is really important for them. I think the biggest thing that I saw, Derek, was the coach's office. I think you've been back in the Ubben old coach's office. I have too. Like, now they have so much more space for all the grad assistants, video guys, all the support staff, and then Underwood's office is just exquisite. Looking over State Farm Center, you can see the practice court, just a lot more space in there. So they did a really good job with that. I do want to we got to bring up the big news. ZZ Clark, Sky Clark's younger brother, 2 classes younger than the freshman point guard, Sky Clark. He decommits. And Derek, I think anybody who's read you, who's listened to you, knew that this was a bit of a question, whether ZZ Clark would play for Illinois. So why? What led to this?
I think you just want to, for both sides, have the right fit. And for ZZ, as someone that still has two years of high school left and a lot still to prove, number one, but still some potential too. There's things to like about his game. Like, he's got good size as a guard. He's strong. He's got good handles, similar to Sky. It's just he's not as explosive as Sky is, and to this point, he's still a lot more unproven than Sky coming out of high school as one of the one time a 5-star, and even as he finished out a top 50 prospect. And ZZ had to prove that he was going to be able to fit into what's a really talented backcourt that Brad Underwood and company have assembled, bringing in 3 guards in 2022 with Sky, Jaden, Sincere. We know that Ty's going to be in the backcourt as well, a decent amount. And to get Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn in 23, to have in 24 Carlos Harris, who we're going to talk more about as a guy that they like quite a bit in the state. It was just, how does ZZ fit in there, and does he elevate his game enough to be a real player at Illinois and not be someone that's just going to get stashed and not get to play a whole lot. So I was wondering how this was going to ultimately be handled, because when you have a guy's brother on the team, and it's a sensitive type of situation, I think that there's no doubt some appeal and the potential for those guys to play together. I know Sky ultimately would want to be an early entry in the NBA and have that kind of success, but if he didn't, then to get a chance to play with his brother would have been pretty cool. But ultimately, it feels like the best thing for ZZ, who didn't play a whole lot this summer, was a backup point guard on a 16U squad in the EYBL, ended up leaving that team, didn't join another one. Now he's at Overtime Elite playing high school. So he's going to be around some talented guys, and he still has a chance to prove himself. It's just right now, as you look at the backcourt picture for Illinois, it's pretty crowded, and he's got to show that he's a no doubt high major prospect. So I think it was probably I think mutually something that people on both sides are okay with, and Illinois still obviously has a lot of guards.
We will circle back to this conversation, but I want to dive into who's next in recruiting, because the 2024 class obviously started with Morez Johnson. 2023, I guess we can say, Derek, there are 3 prospects in this class, because Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, Amani Hansberry, both top 75 prospects are committed, and Zachary Perrin is still committed, even though he wasn't able to enroll after signing with Illinois. He's now at Sunrise Christian, but everything seems to point towards him sticking with Illinois. So, Derek, my read is that's likely the class of 23 prep-wise, and the focus after that will be transfers. Is that the correct read, do you think?
Yes, for sure. And I know that Alex Tui, the prospect out of Australia, was one that Illinois was involved in, and mentioned him on prior podcasts as maybe someone that they would still be interested in adding in 23. He's come out with 4 official visits that he's going to take. Illinois was not one of those. I know Davidson, Gonzaga, Michigan among the group that he's going to check out. So having 3 guys currently in that 23, of course, we'll still see if Zachary Perrin is one that gets the academic side in order to show up mid-year potentially. But they want some flexibility in the portal. And Brad's talked a lot about the ability to add somebody mid-year, because we know in December there's usually some prospects similar to Name Danger that come available. And then also, obviously, in the springtime, a lot of high-level players based on the current environment in college basketball, a la Matthew Meyer, I should say, Terrence Shannon. Illinois wants flexibility, and there's a lot of potential to bring a handful of guys back next year. Obviously, you never know with how that will play out, but they're pretty set in terms of guys that have eligibility to come back, have a good group in 23 right now, and they want to add in the transfer portal as well.
Yeah, and they get some big targets in 2024 and 2025. And before we dive into some of the visitors the last couple of weeks and upcoming here, we have to attack the overarching picture here, Derek. And that is what Tim Anderson has done and his connection to the Mean Streets program. Is Illinois becoming the Illini Mean Streets? Because Terrence Shannon, Ty Rogers, Morez Johnson, all Mean Street guys, James Brown, Carlos Harris, Trey McKenney, Melvin Bell, Noyes, and Drusitis, all Mean Street guys.
I mean, it's a great program to be associated with and be linked to. And Obviously, Chin Coleman with McEwen Fire being able to help in the pursuing of Io. You get Adam Miller, who it didn't pan out at Illinois, but we know that Adam Miller is a very talented prospect. And you looked forward, and I'll admit, when Chin first left, and you're like, uh-oh, the JJ Taylor possibility. What does that mean? Day Ames is a talented guard from Kenwood in that McEwen pipeline. But MeanStreets has really loaded up when you see that Ty Rogers is a guy they were able to get in this past class, and going forward with James Brown switching from McEwen Fire to MeanStreets. Primary reasons because he wanted to play with his boy Morez. You got Morez on board. You got James Brown, Noyes. Those are 3 top 100 players in the 2024 class. Carlos Harris is, I know he's unranked right now, but a very solid 3-star point guard who's does a lot of things that Brad Underwood likes with his toughness, his strength, his on-ball defense, and then even pushing forward into the future, 2025, Melvin Bell, who I know people are getting more and more familiar with in the state, is a top 75 type of prospect, and Trey McKenney's in that top 25 range too. So they have a lot of talent. And yeah, with Tim Anderson being the former program director there, his relationship with Ty Streets, and having once you start to get that ball rolling with, you add a Ty Rogers who has relationships with these other guys, Morez too. We know that Morez is really working that with James Brown and some of these guys. It all helps, and why wouldn't you want to just continue to rake in that talent if you can?
Feels like Underwood has timed up those hires incredibly well. Like strike when the McEwen fires the top program with Io and Adam Miller, and then now with MeanStreets, who have the top trio in the class of 2024 and really good 2025s as well. You mentioned Morez Johnson. I love him as a prospect of kind of this, I don't know if I want to put him this high, but Moussa Diabate kind of role. I like him. Illinois, with the front court they want, coming after Coleman Hawkins, coming after potentially Dane Danger. He's a really, really nice piece, but also just gives you a recruiter, right, Derek? And I know you caught up with him. What do you think the impact of having a guy like Morez Johnson so early, right? Like he committed as a sophomore when that's rare nowadays. It wasn't rare when Tracy Abrams was doing it, 10, 12 years ago, but now it is. So what do you think the impact of having that guy as a recruiter is?
Well, it just took Illinois' recruiting momentum to another level when they were on the heels of that 2022 class of getting Ty Rogers, of having Epps, and also later on you got Sky Clark, we got Sincere Harris, and then for last fall, Morez to jump on board too. It was a big deal, and it definitely radiated throughout the state. And just knowing that the basketball circle, the guys that Morez is on the court with all the time in high school, St. Rita is a loaded program with James Brown, with Noyes, with Melvin Bell, and then they play in the summer in the MeanStreets program. All the guys we just mentioned, the guys that he's around, that means a lot. And Morez has, as he talked to me about, has really embraced this role of being an ambassador for the program, of being someone that's going to hop on Instagram when James Brown takes an official at North Carolina and is like giving me a headache with all of this, and throws out the orange and blue emojis. He's in
nothing will ingratiate you to Illini fans more than trash talking UNC.
That's right. Yeah, and he's in those guys' ear all the time. I know that Roshan Russell has said that Morez picks his spots. He doesn't want to overbear those guys, but it's just the relationship that they have. They respect Morez's game, his talent. Obviously, when you have someone, it's one of the more promising front court prospects out of the state here in the last few years. I know EJ Liddell, obviously, James is in that mix as well too. Braden Huff ultimately turned into that going to Gonzaga, but Morez has a lot of high upside because of his athleticism, because of all the physical tools that can then be complemented with his skill as he develops this. So I think it's a big deal, and Morez is working it hard. And as he said to me, he's trying to help out Tim Anderson as much as he can. And I think that he's got the potential to really do that.
Yeah, and the one thing I like about Morez, I think he's got a high floor too because of his work ethic, his tenacity on the court. Like that's stuff that sometimes you got to teach some front court guys that you don't have to with him. Derek, how much do I look into this? ZZ Clark decommits, Carlos Harris, who you've compared to Andres Felice, and I said, okay, take him right away. How much of a coincidence is that, or should we look into it that Carlos Harris was just on campus and then ZZ Clark decommits?
I think it's a little bit of a coincidence. I think that ultimately, I'm not going to say there's nothing to read into it. In my personal opinion, this is the way I look at it, is because I think Carlos, one thing to say at the forefront is Carlos Harris, his only Power 5 offer right now is from Illinois. So it's Illinois, Northern Illinois are really his main 2 offers. I think that as time goes on, he will be a more highly coveted prospect, especially if programs get the sense that they can compete with Illinois in that. But I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, could it be a ZZ exit the class and Carlos enters it as the point guard in 24? Absolutely. But I don't think that this move happened right now because Carlos is about to commit. I don't think that Illinois is pushing for him to commit quite yet. They like him a lot. They do think he reminds Brad of Andres Feliz for some of those
Quit
qualities.
dragging your feet, Brad. Like, quit dragging the feet if it's Andre, if it's 80% of Andres Feliz. Sorry,
yeah,
that's a trigger.
I know. I get it. And if they took him, I wouldn't say it's a bad move at all. I think one thing, you can have some patience with it because of the offer list, because of the connections, and just continue to evaluate. I think one thing that Carlos needs to show is a 3-point jump shot, needs to continue to progress. He's got everything else. Like his talent is getting downhill, being physical. He's a great on-ball defender. He's a selfless type of guy that gets other guys involved. And when you play with those high-profile prospects on Mean Streets and being able to pick his spots and not try to be all about him, and those guys really like him. Morez has played with him since 6th grade, and both of them would love to team up at Illinois. But I think it's going to be a process that takes some time as they continue to look at him. But there's no doubt that he's someone that the staff really likes and could ultimately take that spot as the point guard in 24.
24, obviously the top target right now is James Brown. I believe 5-star now, James Brown. If not, he's top 30 prospect. So basically 5-star. Out of St. Rita, teammates with Marez Johnson, teammates with Carlos Harris, obviously on the Mean Streets program. You just took a visit to North Carolina, the #1 team in the country right now in the preseason poll, and obviously an absolute blue blood. But Illinois has been in here for a while, Derek, and he's going to take an official visit in a couple of weeks. Just what do you think about the James Brown recruitment right now, where it is, and how Illinois stands?
It's a national recruitment. When you look at during the summer, I believe he was the first big man that both North Carolina and Duke offered in the 2024 class, which says a lot. It says a lot about James and what he showed throughout the spring and the summer. And he's one of the best bigs in the class, and he has a lot of even more untapped potential. I mean, he's a super polished scorer inside. He's got good length, 6'9". He's a good athlete. And he's shown as you got towards the end of the summer and as he's showing here in workouts for St. Rita is that, he can push the ball a little bit. He can handle it. His jump shot needs to come along. It's kind of like the last touch of his development, but he's a high caliber prospect, someone that's going to be wanted if he continues on this trajectory. Going to be wanted by Carolina. Seems like he's going to be wanted by Duke, and those are tough recruitments to win, even though you got a ton of inroads. But Illinois has done a fantastic job. They've been at the very forefront of it. They worked harder than anybody. They obviously have Morez in his ear, but yeah, there's a lot of appeal for North Carolina when they're coming off a national title appearance. I can only imagine being in Chapel Hill and seeing all the banners and the MJ stuff. Really being able to lean on the MJ tie and having all the shoes and everything. I mean, why wouldn't you capitalize on that if you're Carolina? But
now, how much do you think Ohio State's just like, gosh, one more year we would have had LeBron? Like that would have been our brand. Like,
right?
The one and done rule came 1 year too late.
That's a great point. That would have been tough for some other Big Ten teams to compete with. But yeah, for a couple of weeks for James to come here in Champaign, and I'm sure they'll probably get Morez down to help with the sell as well. And it's one that'll be interesting to see where James kind of sees himself after taking that visit. And I know that the Duke date got rescheduled, or he's still working to figure out when he's going to go to Durham to take an official as well, and kind of what his approach will be. Will he want to make a decision, or does he decide to try to wait it out and play through the summer next AAU season, and just kind of what he's thinking? But I think Illinois is still in a very good spot, but yeah, you're going to have some really tough competition. That's not too surprising.
Derek, we've talked about Noyes Indrusitis a lot. It seems like a guy that Illinois, after an up and down summer, maybe wants to scout a little bit more, scout more prospects in that class. But I want to go towards 2025 class because Trey McKenney and Melvin Bell, both Mean Streets kids, were on campus, both 4-star kids, I believe, in this class. What can you tell us about those guys? It's really early in their process, but it seems like Illinois getting them on campus is a good sign of their interest early on.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, like you mentioned, it's early, so these guys still have 3 years of high school left. And sometimes, you got to let the process play out of figuring out who the top players are in the country. But at this juncture, Trey McKenney, a top 25 prospect in that class, did some great things for the 15U squad on Mean Streets this past summer. And he's going to be a highly coveted prospect in the Big Ten, where we talked about with Ty Rogers. It was a rarity for opposing Big Ten program to go into Michigan and pull him away from the Wolverines and the Spartans. And this will be another challenge for Illinois to do that because he's been on campus a couple times at Michigan State, and he's a Flint, Michigan product. We know the Flintstones, going back to Mateen Cleaves, like Mo Pete, those type of guys back in the day for Tom Izzo. And he just took an official visit, or unofficial visit, I should say, to Michigan this past weekend too. He's at Illinois on Saturday and then went to Michigan on Sunday. Juwan Howard definitely wants him too. So Indiana, Ohio State, he's wanted by everybody. And if he continues on this track, maybe even have like a Kentucky jump in down the road too. But in terms of his game, why he's so wanted is because he's got great size at the guard position. He's a combo guard, can play on the ball, off the ball, really skilled, can shoot it well. I mean, in terms of a big body type of guard, like almost like a Taylor Horton Tucker a little bit, and that kind of a mold. And just
bringing up memories here, Derek. I
know, right? It's just when someone is 6'3", 6'4", he's got some build to him and can just handle it and move so light on his feet. That's kind of one of the comps that comes to mind. So he's a really high level player. And Melvin Bell unfortunately missed most of the AAU season with an injury. What we've seen so far is an explosive athlete, 6'4", strong. He's got a lot of potential as someone that can attack the rim and can also score from the outside too. So being in that St. Rita program, going to be part of a reason why St. Rita's picked to win the state title this year, along with Morez, Noyes, and James Brown.
We mentioned Noyes, Derek. They're also looking at some other 2024 guards, right? Who should we keep an eye on the wing there?
Dwayne Pierce is a guy out of New York, goes to Christ the King, same high school that Kofi went to out there. I know that Illinois spent quite a bit of time watching the New York Wrens 16Us. MeanStreets was obviously a big focal point too, but the Wrens with Pierce, with Quinn Pang, a skilled big man. I know that you're a big fan of his game. So Dwayne Pierce is someone that has said recently that he wants to check out Illinois for a visit at some point. I think Illinois still feels like they have, even despite Orlando Antigua being gone, a decent amount of influence out there in New York because of Kofi, because of the ties that they developed in being able to pull him in and obviously have some success in developing him and lead to him being an All-American. So Dwayne Pierce is someone to watch out for. Raquise Passmore from Combine Academy out there in New York, or I should say North Carolina, same place that Jaden Epps played high school, is one that Chester Frazier offered earlier this fall. He went and checked him out here in recent weeks. He's a top 60 caliber prospect, 6'4", and a good player too. And Jonathan Powell out of Ohio is someone, same AAU team as Sincere Harris, and one that Illinois has already had on campus throughout the last year or so. So a handful of options on that wing off guard position. I think if Noyes really shows that he's a must get, if he makes some of the strides with his consistency, with his defense, with being able to get stronger, then maybe he's just the automatic. We'll take him and we're good there. But as he was a little bit up and down, I think Illinois has been a little bit more open-minded, and they've, as we've seen throughout recruiting classes in the past, like they have connections, they have the ability to go in different places. They don't need to just be married to the state. So they're gonna explore all their options in 24.
Two more names I just want to mention because people are going to ask about them if we don't. Jeremiah Fears out of Joliet in the class of 2025. He's a bucket, man. He's really fun to watch. Smallish guard. His brother Jeremy, obviously going to Michigan State. And then Phoenix Gill. I think it's an interesting early offer. Obviously, the legacy, Kendall Gill and his son, and he's got size, he's got athleticism, still a maturing body. I think he's going to get a lot bigger. And he'll develop because he seems to have the work ethic. So just two more names, Derek. If you got any thoughts on, you can add.
Yeah, Phoenix Gill certainly showed, the high flying potential. Had a couple of good dunks. I know we were watching him at RB, Riverside Brookfield, this past summer at their event. And some of the things that he showed, he's obviously still got a long way to go in terms of his development and being a young guy in high school, but showed some of the flashes that led Illinois to offer. And they're going to continue to monitor that. As we've seen in the past, an offer doesn't always mean that there'll be a priority target down the line, but knowing the connections to Kendall, and like you said, someone that's putting a lot of work in his game, and to have someone like Kendall to lean on in his development, it would be really exciting to see that type of legacy show up at Illinois, knowing the fanfare, knowing the excitement, and just hopefully if the bloodlines lead to him being a pretty good player, that'd be really fun to see play out. Jeremiah Fears, he's a bucket getter. He's small, he's slight in stature. I've always been a little, since the Jeremy Fears thing with Illinois and it didn't pan out and he ends up at Michigan State, been a little skeptical of another Fears brother ending up at Illinois. I continue to be so. I would understand why, as a player, Illinois would be interested, but I think that at this point, I'd probably expect Jeremiah to end up somewhere else. Michigan's been involved.
Yeah.
There have been some other teams out there. As if he continues to grow a little bit more and continue to show that he's a high level shot maker, he's going to have a lot of options. I just don't know that he'll necessarily end up at Illinois.
All right, I think we answered who's next, and James Brown, I think, is the top of that list. That is the number one priority right now. Derek, two more things. You said a name that made me think of a topic I want to get to wrap this thing up just for fun. But the Kansas secret scrimmage, not so secret, but it will happen this weekend. I believe it's Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah, Saturday, the 22nd in St. Louis. What a great matchup. Brad has raved about Kansas's championship team last year, how all those long, versatile wings, older team, obviously, but they defensive rebound as a team, great defensively. So I think it's obviously a different Kansas team, but that's going to be a great test for Illinois. Certainly better than some exhibition against a D2 team. But what are you hoping, if you're an Illinois fan, to hear out of this? Because they're secret, but all of a sudden Goodman gets something, Piper gets something, right? Like it's going to leak out a little bit of what happened. So what's one thing you would want to hear out of this?
That's a great question. I think that if you hear Sky Clark is 100% healthy and he looks like the guy that pre-injury, if that were to come out, and I think just maybe the overarching that the freshman guards were able to handle playing up against a high-level opponent, they were able to run the offense, not turn the ball over too much, and they feel good about their point guards, then that would be something that would really encourage me, because as we talked a lot about, like, I expect their defense to be pretty darn good because of the athletes, because of the length. It wouldn't be a surprise to me if Terrence Shannon Jr. goes off on Kansas making threes and some highlight slams. I think Matthew Meyer coming off the back injury is something that if he were to have a great showing, that would maybe encourage people quite a bit. I don't think that he's really someone you're too nervous about going into the season. I'd probably look at Sky Clark in particular if I'm really to zero in on one guy, but probably the freshman point guards in general.
Yeah, I think just even if they have turnovers, Derek, just that they're not scared, right? Like, I mean, going up against Kansas and the Kansas jersey, I think that'd be good. Also, defensive rebounding. Losing Kofi's not easy. I know the upside of it, but the downside is you just had a guy that's going to get 10 rebounds a game, most of them on the defensive side. So I'm really interested to see how they team rebound against a Kansas team that's usually pretty physical. Last topic for you, Derek. You brought up the name Adam Miller, and I'm excited to watch Adam Miller healthy. I think he'll do really well at LSU. I'm interested to see how he handles maybe more of a league guard role, because I think he's a guy with NBA potential. I mean, we see a guy like Jordan Poole doing what he's doing. Like, Adam Miller as a prospect out of high school wasn't that dissimilar from him. And I think Adam Miller would have been good for Illinois last year. But which of the former Illini who transferred out are you most interested in watching this year? Adam Miller at LSU, Jacob Grandison at Duke, or Andre Curbelo at St. John's?
Oh, man. I think Curbelo always has interest, right? I mean, it's how well it ultimately goes at St. John's. I think a lot of people will be, coming on the heels of a year ago, we were talking.
I forgot to add two. Benjamin Bossman's Verdonk, maybe
Oh,
starting for South Carolina.
game changing.
And Brandon Podziemski at Santa Clara.
The new hairdo, too.
Yeah.
Man.
I think I'm really interested to see Verdonk as a starter potentially.
Yep.
But it's Curbelo. Come on. Because we know how good he can be. We know how bad he can be. We knew he had to move on at the end of the season. I still think he can be good. And at St. John's, they have the freedom to do what you need to do with Andre Curbelo, which is give him the keys, and for better or for worse, you deal with it and hope it's for the better, right? And that at St. John's, I think they're really smart to get that kind of guy. It could go bad, could go poorly. I root for the best for him because I love covering him, and I think he's a really exciting basketball player whose last season just did not go the way it was supposed to due to an injury.
Yeah, absolutely. And no matter what you think about Andre, I know a lot of people got tired of his
Yeah.
turnovers. He was a loose cannon for sure. Some of it was self-inflicted for sure, but what he went through was something that a lot of people would have struggled with the concussion, with the way the just the symptoms continued to linger on for him, and just trying to be inserted back into the season with so much expectations and knowing how key he was to that team. Uh, yeah, if he goes and kills it at St. John's, and if Illinois has some growing pains out of freshman point guards, and you're like, oh man. Unfortunately, if that would have been differently, of course, people were saying at this time last year, if Curbelo has a season he could, he'd go to the NBA, be an All-American, that type of thing. But Curbelo's always with his style of play, with his flash, his flair. I mean, he's a polarizing dude, but he's also a
We
dude
are
that
triggering some people right now talking about Andre Curbelo. And listen,
I
did he
know,
handle everything well last year? Probably not. But as you said, I don't think a lot of people would,
right?
given what he went through, the expectations, the spotlight. Like that's really tough. And it's probably best for both. Even if Curbelo has a better year than Sky Clark, which I don't know if he will. Like it's best for both to move on.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm rooting for him as well. And I'll be very curious to see Mike Anderson's up and down tempo. St. John's might turn the ball over a lot, but they'll probably score a lot too. So that will be fun to watch. But yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what Adam can do at LSU too. I think that him being healthy, and we know that he was one of the more gifted shot makers in that class. I think that that's another one. We'll see how he ultimately shows up this year.
Grandison at Duke, I think we know what he is. And I think he'll do just fine at Duke. I think it'll be a nice piece for them. Like, to have a stabilizing presence. And I think we don't talk enough about Derek, like how much they missed Jacob Grandison in March, right? Like Big Ten tournament, they could have really used him. Just a shooter, knockdown shooter, steady guy. And against Houston, they could have used a guy that can make some threes. And people talk about why didn't RJ Melendez play more? It was Jacob Grandison. Like Jacob Grandison was tough to take off the court because he was damn good. He was just a damn good basketball player and a good role player.
Yeah, I think him number one, you're absolutely right about the way that he was able to feed Kofi, the way he was able to provide the floor spacing, make the threes, and someone that could just be right place, right time in terms of rebound. I know athletically limited,
Right.
and now playing on a Duke team where they're going to need some veteran leadership, some solid role guys as their freshmen, which are highly talented. Shocker, each and every year come into their own. So that will be interesting to see kind of what his role will ultimately play into. And can Boss Man make layups? I think he's going to rebound and be physical on the inside, but I think that's one thing that obviously he left to be desired at Illinois. But yeah, there were some guys from last season that they brought some quality things, even in a boss man role. You're looking at, okay, if Coleman Hawkins isn't on the floor at the five, if Dane gets in foul trouble, who's that third five man? A BBV could have been a nice guy to throw in there for a few minutes.
Out of all of those guys who transferred, he was the one that shocked me. Like, I get it. He could be playing a huge role in an SEC program, and it would have been maybe the third big for Illinois, but he would have been a nice third big. Like they don't have that physical, like to have another physical guy. Like he's somebody who can go up against Hunter, can go up against Edey and just battle them for a little bit. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, you got to replace BBV here, but he would have been a nice third big man. I don't know if they have right now.
I think so too. Maybe because Edey came back, BBV was like, "No, I'll
Doesn't
go to
take
the SEC."
elbows. Doesn't take elbows from that guy. But Derek Piper, thank you for getting us caught up to speed with Illinois basketball. Just a couple weeks from the exhibition. You got to cover that one solo, man, because Joey and I will be on our way to Nebraska. I'll let you know how Lincoln is. But yeah, it's just around the corner, man.
It is. I'm excited to hear what we will get out of that Kansas secret scrimmage. But yeah, just the fact that season right around the corner, and it's okay that it's maybe sneaking up on some people as they're all engulfed into Illini football. It's been too long, and I'm happy for you and Joey to really get to cover a team that's holding the interest and has a lot on the table. It's going to be a really exciting upcoming months for that team.
I told Derek just to take people behind the scenes, like we're covering some bad teams there for a while. Both John Gross in the early years of Brad Underwood. I tell you, someday they're going to be good. And it's all going to be worth it because it is fun to cover good teams. Like it's more interesting. People are happier who you're covering. People are happier who or read you and listen to you, all that stuff. I never said that with football because I didn't know if it would happen there, but now that's happening. It's a nice relief.
I bet. Is it going to make the plans for the weekend that Illinois is in Vegas and Michigan? complicating some things, huh?
I think I might trust Joey just to cover 9-1 Illinois against 10-0 Michigan. Because we'll be in Vegas.
I trust him for sure. Yeah.
We'll be in Vegas, and we can do some
sir.
Vegas things on that day off and maybe watch it from a place that's a little bit warmer than Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Sounds
Derek
great.
Piper, thank you, buddy.
Yes, sir. Anytime.